All right, welcome back. John here. Today I want to talk a little bit about my recent trip to Kings Canyon National Park and also talk about what I think is one of Fujifilm's best lenses, maybe the best lens. I guess I'll let you be the judge of that, but that's what we're going to get into here in this video today. So in the beginning here, I was waiting for my friends to show up at the campsite that we had, and I had like an hour to kill. So I went and wandered around this path, which runs by the Grant tree, which is apparently the second biggest tree by volume on Earth. That's coming up here in a little bit. But, you know, the forest like this is a little bit tricky to capture because these trees are just magnificent and huge, but it's a little hard for that to come across on camera. So I started out trying to get a couple of shots with actual people in them to kind of give you a sense of the scale a little bit of this place. I tried to do that a little bit throughout this little walk here. If you ever get a chance to visit this place, Kings Canyon's beautiful. It's right next to Sequoia National Park, which is also gorgeous. And all these trails are super accessible. This wasn't like a hiking adventure, really. It's all just paved paths, and it was all really easy to get to. And I'd like to come back here and do a little bit more like actual hiking and get on trail a little bit and be a little more adventurous. But anyway, my first couple shots here are of the couple trees that I found right at the start. And I kind of realized the lens that I was using, which is the Fujifilm 16 to 80 f4, is wide, but not quite wide enough for objects this large. So what I ended up doing was taking some panorama shots where you just stitch two frames vertically together, and that ended up working pretty well. And what you see is me then taking frames with just my hand over the lens to make basically a dark frame so that I know which images belong together, basically. That just makes everything a lot easier when you get into your editing program later. It can be a real challenge to try and figure out which images are supposed to be stitched together, especially because I shoot in bracketed mode. So I basically have 3 images for every single one that I take. So yeah, just one way to make that a little bit easier. I have to say that when you go to a place like this, one thing I love about this particular lens is you're kind of stuck on these pathways. They're fenced off. You're not supposed to be traipsing across the forest in this particular area. And so it's really nice to have then a lens that can kind of reach out and also move back and get like a nice wide shot too, because you really can't move your body a lot. This is a tough place to shoot prime lenses because you don't have a lot of places to go when you're actually taking photographs. So having a zoom with the kind of range that this lens has is really handy for this kind of scenario. And I find that a lot when I travel, where you're not really supposed to be going certain places, and so you've got to use the lens in order to get the kinds of shots that you want. This is a great example of that exact scenario where I have 2 trees that are kind of connected together, and I try at first getting a kind of a close-in shot, sort of using them to frame a tree that's behind. And I think that's actually the shot that I end up liking better. But then without moving or going anywhere, you know, you can just go wider and take another shot. And I've coming up here in a little bit is a frame of kind of the trees staying together, which gives you more context for the scene. I'm not super happy with any of these photographs, really. This wasn't really a photo trip as much as just I was hanging out with some friends for 2 days, and I thought I would try and carve out a little bit of time for taking some photos. Normally I like to do like a little more scouting, a little more walking around and really kind of prepare myself more. Most of these were just me showing up somewhere and I just kind of would start shooting. And I don't know, I still enjoyed myself, and it was just such a beautiful and awesome place to hang out. I don't regret that at all. I'm also amazed at the resolving power of this lens is pretty good. I was able to crop a lot of the shots that I took on this particular trip, and the resolution still looks really nice, and I was really happy with the output. I remember when I purchased the 16 to 80 thinking that f4 would be a real limitation in my photography. I shoot a lot of primes. I tend to shoot them wide open a lot at 1.8 or 2.8 f2. And so I was worried that f4 would be problematic for the work that I do, but honestly, it's been completely fine, and I rarely miss it. I've even got a video coming up where I do some night photography with this lens, and I gotta say it held up shockingly well for that kind of thing, and it's not really made for that. So the stabilization is pretty amazing. So I came over here to the Grant tree. This is the second biggest tree in the two parks, Kings Canyon and Sequoia. And as I was walking up, there was a guy in this red backpack, and he was going to be the perfect subject to be standing right in front of this tree as I took a shot. And literally the moment I got here, he walked away. He was done doing whatever he was doing. So that was unfortunate. I ended up sitting down on this bench and waiting for a good while for a group of people to come into the frame that looked a little more organized. It was kind of chaotic there for a while. And ultimately, I think more or less it works. It's okay. A lot of these photos are the same. They're kind of a big tree. But that's okay. That's what we were here for. So if you do show up to this area, I actually recommend you maybe come to this particular spot before you go and see the Sherman tree, or maybe don't see the Sherman tree at all. Even though that area is really incredible in Sequoia, I think this tree is an area is much more accessible and was easy to get to. And I think the placement of the tree is a little bit more impressive as well. You can get a little closer to it, and I don't know, the surrounding areas are just sort of better. I think overall I had a better experience here than I did in Sequoia in terms of viewing large Sequoia trees. That was kind of it on this little loop. It was only a half-mile loop. I didn't take a ton of photographs, but I was able to use this camera to get a little bit of B-roll in this area too, which you saw at the beginning of this sequence. And I gotta say, when you shoot 4K 60, the stabilization between the camera and the lens is really good. You can get some really nice B-roll. And it's sort of amazing to me how versatile this lens is. And I think part of why I wanted to talk about that in this video is, there's a lot of really impressive lenses from Fujifilm in terms of their rendition or how they look or sharpness, that kind of thing. Character, I think, is another thing that some of their lenses have that is really special. And this one kind of doesn't have any of those things, though it is pretty sharp. I think what makes it potentially the best is that it's just good in almost every single situation that I put it in. And I think that's why it always ends up in my bag, and why I might say it is one of the best, maybe the best, for the Fujifilm X system. All right, I'll let you go for a minute. We're going to have a little camping mashup here, and I'll see you back for a second photo walk in a minute or two. Oh, and by the way, this is the Shimoda Explorer backpack. I'm very happy with this as a camera bag, so I'm going to probably do a video on that at some point in the future. All right, so my last little photo walk here during the second day of our trip was basically right in the evening. I we had a plan that kind of fell apart, and I didn't really know where I was going to go. And my friend said, "Hey, there's a cool spot off the road if you want to go up there and take some photos." I had maybe 40 minutes of light, so this is all kind of just a mad dash to try and get some photographs, which, as I said earlier, is not really my way. Usually I show up at a location and I'll wander around for maybe an hour, kind of scoping things out, waiting for the light to get better, and then I'll get set up, and then I'll go through and take some photographs, and maybe go through again and do like some B-roll on like a third walk. So I just was kind of doing everything all at once. But again, this lens came in super handy for that, because it is able to do so many things at the same time. I do have complaints with using the Fujifilm X-T4, which is what I was shooting with. Switching between photo and video, it's kind of a pain. The settings, because of the control wheels on the top, which generally I love, the settings are kind of a pain to go through, switching between the two, because you need a different shutter speed always, and I don't know, it's just kind of annoying. I might be looking at picking up maybe one of the new XH2 cameras for that purpose in the future. I don't know, pretty expensive. I'm happy with this camera overall. I do have two bodies. I have an X-T2, so maybe I'll just shoot video on one and photos on the other. Anyway, I was wandering around up here, and the drive up here was pretty amazing. In fact, this whole forested area was just absolutely gorgeous. I think it's called Panoramic Point. You can see on the sign in the beginning of this section. So if you get up to this area, I highly recommend you come up here, especially in the evening. All the light was just spilling through the forest and through the trees, and lighting up the moss on the side of all these trees and stuff. It was really incredible. I had a really nice time up here, and the whole time I was thinking, I wish I had an hour or two instead of just the last few minutes of daylight here, but it was totally worth it. The actual Panoramic Point, I don't want to say disappointing, but not really like a lot of photographs. I got one kind of decent photograph of this landscape of the lake through the trees. I think that's coming up here in a little bit, but as beautiful as it is and as nice as the scene is, that happens a lot. I think in the beginning of my photography, pretty much anytime I got somewhere where I saw something pretty, a pretty mountain, a sunset, whatever, I would try and get a photograph of it. But the reality is that you need a good subject in order to make the photographs work. At least that's how my photographs work, and sort of that's how I work. And so sometimes you go someplace that is really incredible and really beautiful, but there's not really a subject to be had. So one thing I did here in the beginning is kind of just zoomed in again, usefulness of this particular lens almost all the way into 80 mil, and just got a shot of sort of these layers of trees, which I kind of like doing from time to time. And it's a way to kind of get like a close-in shot of the landscape that you're in. And sometimes just moving, I think this next section that I walk up to is probably only 50 or 60 yards or meters up from where I was standing before. But, there were just better compositions of the lake and of the mountains here in the background from this slightly higher vantage point. So don't be afraid to walk around. If you're not quite getting the shot you're looking for where you are, it's amazing how moving a lot of times, even just a little bit, can completely change the scene in front of you. I took two of these, a frame with just the mountains in the background and then a frame with the sky. I can't really decide which one I like better. I don't know. I think those are probably two of the best shots from this particular trip. None of these photographs I think are going in like the portfolio or anything, but I still had a really great time here and just absorbing the surroundings. And I don't know, you feel like in this spot up in the Sierra Nevada mountain ranges, it's a real sort of return to nature, I guess. You see a lot of animals, and we saw some bears and some deer and obviously like squirrels and stuff. And I don't know, it's a completely different feeling than being kind of locked away in a concrete city all the time. And there's just something really great about it. Shot a little B-roll while I was up here too, of like some plants and trees and stuff. And you know, this lens is really good for that. It is a little bit jumpy on the stabilization. I'm not sure if that's the lens or if that's the XD4 or the combination of the two, but some of the camera work requires a little bit of stabilization in post just to get rid of like the big kind of jumps as you're panning around or sliding from one side to the next. I found that a little bit annoying, and so you do kind of have to learn how to use this combination to get nice smooth shots. It's not exactly easy. You know, I see people on videos all the time just like swinging these cameras around. Like you can just do whatever you want with it and the footage will look good, but that, I don't know, you gotta be a little bit, you really have to learn how to use the tool in order to get the kind of footage that you want out of it in terms of video. And my video skills honestly are way lacking in comparison to my photography skills. I just have a lot more time and practice invested in my photography than I do in video. As I was shooting this little bit of B-roll, interestingly enough, a squirrel went running right by in front of my lens, and he had like this huge nut in his mouth, and I wanted to get a photo of him, but there was just kind of no time. I'm not a nature photographer, certainly not a gifted one, and yeah, that opportunity kind of just got away from me, but I thought it was funny, so figured I'd leave it in. I don't think I got him. The colors out of the 16-80 f4 also very good. Always been really happy with the colors out of this lens and Fujifilm in general. Of course, it's partly why I shoot with these cameras. This particular photograph, I don't know. You know what? I'm trying to be a little bit more liberal with my photography. I would tend often to not take photographs of things that I don't think are great compositions. And I think I'm trying to let go of that a little bit and just shoot a little bit more and see what happens, because once in a while you walk away with something that you're really happy with that you maybe wouldn't have taken otherwise. I don't know that really panned out in this situation. I'm not super happy with the path that kind of wraps around this tree. I'm not really sure where the subject is. It's not my favorite. This bench, I feel like I would like to have worked a little bit longer. I think I could have gotten a really good shot of this, or maybe me sitting on the bench would have been good. Per the usual, I forgot my tripod. I had one in my car, but I didn't take it. Pretty standard John move. I rarely ever have a tripod, and when I do, I usually end up leaving it in the car and forgetting to bring it with me. So that's okay. Turned out to be an okay photo, but I think I could have gotten something really nice here if I had spent a little more time. Don't be afraid to work a scene for a while, just from different angles and to kind of stare at things and look at it. My problem here was I was running out of light, so I kind of had to move a little bit more quickly. All right, that's kind of it for this one. Man, what a place. This walk through this forest for 45 minutes or an hour was one of the most relaxing things I've done in a really long time. And you'll see on my exit, I was driving out and ran across some deer that were, you know, not more than maybe, you know, 3 or 4 meters from my car. So I took a couple photographs of those, and I don't know, there's something about being in a place like that, like this, that just kind of resets you and just, I don't know, makes you feel better. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're considering picking up a Fujifilm 16-80, highly recommended. Love this lens. I keep talking about it. I'm using it all the time. It's pretty much stays on my camera most of the time, this and the 35mm f2. So I hope you are well. We'll see you in the next one.